Damon, my buddy Tom's here. Tom,
Hey.
well, you sound good today, man.
Thank you.
What'd you
I'll
get? A
take
new mic? You get a
I'll
new
take
mic
that.
or something?
No, man, same mic. Same
Wow.
mic. Just apparently apparently my voice is in good shape today.
Maybe my earpieces are new or something, and I'm,
Yeah, maybe.
I'm.
Maybe that could be.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Let's just get it going. We were talking about goal setting, Tom.
Yeah, man. So I did that I don't know if you saw, I posted on social media a couple of days ago a video where I was answering the question where people like, because I got a ton of questions following up like on my Ironman, and even in the lead up to it, a lot of people asked when I tell them what an Ironman is, they would say, "Why would you do that? Like, that's crazy. It's an insane amount of effort to put into something, not just the actual event, but all the training that goes into it, the aches and pains that you go through." I broke my collarbone training for the thing, like had to have surgery to have it fixed. And so I get this question all the time: why would you do it? Why would you do an Ironman? And my answer was, in this video that I posted the other day on social media, the answer was because it makes me feel alive, right? Because I don't want to be a passive observer of life, right? I want to be an active participant in it. And I think the way to be an active participant in life, the way to kind of cross over from being a passive observer to an active participant, for me, the secret to that is setting goals that challenge me, always pushing my comfort zone, trying to do something harder that I've never done before. Right. And I said in the video, I'm 43 years old. I did my first Ironman last year when I was 42. Right. I'm 43 now, and I feel more alive, more engaged than I ever have before in my life. Like, I feel like I'm just starting to figure out, I haven't even hit my stride yet. I feel like I'm just starting to figure out what my stride might be.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's because I challenge myself and I set crazy goals and then work hard to try to accomplish them.
You're
That's,
you're spe- you're speaking my language, man. I love what you're saying.
but yeah, I mean, that's what I want to talk about today, is like the value of goal setting. Right. And I think the thing is like, I set a goal, right, for this Ironman that I barely achieved. Right. My goal was to be under 12 hours. I achieved it, but it was 11 hours, 54 minutes and some odd seconds. Right. So, like, I didn't make it by a lot in the course of, in the context of 12 hours, 5 minutes and change is not very much. Right. I could have easily not made that goal. So it wasn't like I set a goal that was going to be super simple. Right. It was also a harder course. Right. It was a harder bike. It was it was a more challenging run. Right. So I could have easily set a goal that I knew I could achieve. Right. Cross the finish line. Well, I already know I can do that. So, like, that's not a goal worth setting. A goal worth setting is one that, like, you're not really sure if you're going to get there. Right. Because it's about the process. It's about pushing yourself. It's about challenging those boundaries and, like, finding new, like you hear people talk about in fitness and in exercise and in sports, like finding a new gear. Right. It's about finding that new gear. It's about working hard enough and pushing yourself hard enough that you get faster, you get better, you get fitter. Right. Instead of just setting a goal that you can do. Like, I know I can go out and ride 100 miles on my bike. That's never going to be a goal that I set, right, for riding a bike. Because for me, I know that's something I can do, right? So last summer, a few of my friends and I decided to ride 200 miles in a day because it was something that none of us had ever done. And we did it. Took us whole day. It was a challenge. It was about 13 hours of moving time, so 13 hours of actually pedaling, like riding the bikes, and about 16 hours total time. We did it like right at sort of the longest part of the year, like where the days are the longest. But yeah, I mean, it was a challenge, and it wasn't one that we were 100% sure we were going to really be able to accomplish. But we tried, right, and we got there. So I think it's important that people set goals that challenge them, right? It's not about, like, I'm not expecting you or anybody else to sign up to do an Ironman. That's a goal for me, right? That was a goal that I set for myself, was to do an Ironman and then to do it better, right? To do it faster, to improve that. So, and now I'm going to try to run a standalone marathon. I've never done one before. I've only ever run a marathon at the end of an Ironman. So, and I've set a time goal for myself of like doing it in less than 3.5 hours, right? And that may be overly optimistic. I'm not 100% sure I can do that, but I'm going to try, right? So, yeah, I think, that's what I want to talk about today, is just goal setting and actually using goals to push yourself. So what do you think? I mean, you just did something like this, right? You just set a goal to push yourself. Talk about, I want to hear all about your mile swim, right? I mean, that was a big goal for you.
Yeah, and like I love this idea of goal setting in business, in life, pushing yourself a little farther, a little farther. I grew up in the landscape business. My dad's a horticulturalist and arborist, and there was always this thought: a tree was either growing or it was dying. And so in life, I kind of feel the same way. We're either growing or we're dying. So whether that's writing a new book, taking on a new challenge, swimming a mile in a lake. I set out this summer to swim a mile in a lake. I've been talking about it for years and years and years. And it was just one of these things this year where I'm like, okay, this year I'm going to go for it. And moving forward, finding a lake, finding people that were interested in the same thing, and then actually going out and having the confidence to do it. And now once I did it, I thought, we were talking earlier before we came on, I probably still had more in the tank. I probably could do more. I probably could have got on my bike afterwards and rode a little bit. So you start to think, okay, what's the next challenge? Is it swimming it faster? Is it doing this? Is it doing that? So that's where I'm at. I love to talk challenges. So let's see if anybody else, let's see if Deshaun or Debbie wants to talk challenges. Let's go. Deshaun, Debbie, my friend Debbie. Okay. And then with business too, Tom, there's challenges all the time where you think, maybe if I got into this, it would open these doors. Maybe if I stepped out of my comfort zone here, could I meet new people? If I went to a networking event, could I meet new leads? If I was willing to try marketing like this or that, maybe business would change. So it's all stepping out of that comfort zone and setting these goals. And then, like you did, like when I watched your video, 150 days, you had so many systems in place, so many schedules, so many benchmarks and metrics to get you to where you needed to go. So if we want to hit our goals, Tom, how do we set up these benchmarks and metrics?
Sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, I think you just have to. I think it starts with some of it comes from experience, but I think it all starts with putting a system in place, right? Making sure that you put systems in place that that are designed to facilitate success, right, or create opportunity or potential for success. So, what I mean by that is, um, I have, um, uh, you know, I have a training plan. So like I'm a big proponent of training plans. I know a bunch of people who run marathons and stuff like that who don't necessarily follow a training plan. And the common denominator there there is, and there's one person in particular I'm thinking about, who's a friend of ours who has this goal to run a marathon at a certain pace, right? To finish a marathon in under 4 hours. It's something that they've never accomplished, and they have this goal to do it, but they don't use a training plan, right? And so in my mind, they're not setting themselves up for success, right? Because they don't have any systems in place to be able to actually see their improvement, right? And to methodically work towards that goal, right? Instead, they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, right? It's throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. You know what I mean? Um, and 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 so I don't think that's a good approach to accomplishing a goal, right? Just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks doesn't seem like a good way to get to the finish line in anything, right? It's a good way to flounder around, right? It's like if you were doing your mile swim, if you got in the water and just started randomly splashing your arms and legs around, you're probably not going to make it a mile before you run out of energy. But if you methodically move your arms and legs in concert in a way that propels you forward, you'll get there. Right. And I think that's what a training plan for something like an Ironman or a marathon or, what have you, whatever your goal is, take that training plan analogy and bring it over to business. Right. I think you can do the same thing in business, but having a training plan, having a system in place that,
Tom, could you give us an example of that for business? Like, what would you like? I'm writing a book, or I want to start a podcast, or do
yeah.
more video.
Yeah. I mean, the one that jumps to mind right away, that's like, I think probably the easiest, lightest lift that is pretty ubiquitous for business owners, or folks in the workforce in general, right? Is a calendar, right? So you can set your calendar up so that it is designed as sort of a training plan, that it provides structure to your days, right? So you know what you're doing, when you're doing it, what the goals are that you want to accomplish by doing those things, right? You set your calendar up like, I forget the terminology for it, but I literally, if I open up my calendar for work, I have every day mapped out, including time for lunch. We talked about this with Johnny the other day, a couple of weeks ago, right? Including time for lunch, including time for sleep, including time off the clock in the evening that I just have labeled as me time, right? Which is really when Becky and I spend time together, time when we have dinner together every night, like things like that, right? Sometimes networking events bleed into that time. But I try to reserve that time for me and for work. I try not to work on the weekends if I can possibly avoid it, right? Sometimes I have to. I own my own business, and sometimes, the demands are that I have to work on the weekend. But, sometimes, but for the most part, I don't. And that's very intentional, right? Um, uh, but during the day, I have, we talked about Calendly, right? We've talked about it a bunch of times in here. I have Calendly set up so that I have different links for different times a day for different kinds of meetings, right? So I do, certain meetings during certain times a day. So I don't book, I generally book intro meetings in the morning, right? And meetings with clients in the afternoon. So things like that are good systems that you can put in place that provide structure so that you can see that you're moving in the right direction.
I couldn't agree more. I think we need to go to Dr. Tachi. We're talking about goal setting. We were talking about like Tom just ran his Ironman. I just swam a mile out in the open water. We were talking about having goals in business, and Tom was saying like having a training plan, having a schedule, having a calendar. What tips would you share like that can help get you to your goal?
Ooh, great question. All of that, yes, absolutely. Um, I think identifying what the goal is, starting from the beginning. I think sometimes people have a goal that they think they're supposed to have based on other people's experiences in business. And that's not necessarily going to be your experience, nor should it be your goal. So identify what your goal is for you. You probably already said this. Excuse me, you probably already said this, but identifying that goal and then looking at how to get there, not necessarily just based off of other people because it may not work. And then also, I know this seems counterintuitive, but know what your exit strategy is. Excuse me, I had to cough. Know what your exit strategy is, because I think that will also help you in terms of, and exit strategy doesn't always mean this is when I'm closing or this is when I end. It could be this is when I pivot to something else, or this is when it pivots to become something bigger or greater. So know what that is. For you, and that can help you get to that initial goal. When you know where you're going, you'll know what to do.
Dr. Tachi, we always love when you come through and just drop the knowledge, don't we, Tom?
Absolutely, absolutely love having Dr. Tachi in the room with us as always and up on stage. And yeah, I mean, I think she nailed it right on the head, and it's actually something we hadn't talked about. But that was how do you figure out how do you set that goal, right? How do you select that goal? Um, and I always think that goals should be things that you're not sure you can attain, right? So I think that's like sort of the in the broadest, most general sense, like that is the criteria that I think uh, people should, or the lens through which people should first examine goal setting is picking something that is not a lock, not a sure thing, that they have a fair amount that's like a toss up, like a 50-50 is probably a good way to do it. Like it's a 50-50, it's a coin toss whether or not I'll get there, right? But there's no doubt that if you reach for a potentially unachievable goal, in the process of reaching for that goal, you will get further faster than if you were to reach for a guaranteed attainable goal. So I don't know. That's kind of how I look at goal setting and how I look at selecting a goal. What do you think?
Well, we got a clap from Dr. Tachi, so go on, Dr. Tachi.
No, that's great. You always put things in such understandable terms, Tom. Same thing with you, Dom. The way you break things down is very, both of you, very great and concise. So, yeah, I just have to agree with Tom on this one, as usual.
Tom, you're
Thanks. I
blowing up
appreciate
there. You're
that.
blowing up.
I
Okay,
appreciate it. Appreciate it.
let's talk
Let's
to
see
our
what.
friend Debbie.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
Okay, Debbie, we're talking about goals. We're talking about goal setting. We're talking about get you to where you want to go. So, what's your question or what's your thoughts on the subject?
Well, I was going to follow up with what Dr. Tachi's just said. I set my goals, and recently I've just finished a book. I'm trying to get it published. We're getting very close now. Thank you, Dom. And you can set that goal, but I also believe in breaking it down into bite sizes so that you feel like you are accomplishing something, because it's great to have a goal that's high and very just a little bit out of your reach, so that you it stretches you, gets you out of your comfort zone, but break it down into small bites so that as you achieve each of those little goals, you are going in the right direction, but you feel like you're not overwhelmed, and yet you feel like you are accomplishing something. So for me, it's always been about breaking it down into small bites and achieving those little goals to get to the big goal.
Love it, Debbie. I love this idea of chunking. We talked about chunking before in this room, where you break it down little by little. If I do this, I'm one of these guys that have I call well projects, these giant projects that might take 10 years. I might have, like, I have screenplays that I wrote 5 years ago that they're just there because I think when I get a meeting at some point, I need to have other information. I have to have other works with me, and those might have been the easiest to write at a certain point in time, the most marketable, but not the maybe not the best, maybe not the most passionate, but the story that I think was the most marketable. So when I get in that room, something I did 5 years ago was for that reason. So I love breaking things down into chunks. Tom, Dr. Tachi, what do you think?
You know what? Yes, breaking things down into small bites because I mean, I hate the whole thing of eating an elephant because who wants to do that? But it's the same thing about you can't eat an elephant in one sitting. You have to take it a little bit at a time, and that applies to anything. And there's something else that I wanted to add to this that is kind of in the same strain. Now, like Dominic, Dom is a writer. I'm a writer. I think many of us are writers as well, but sometimes there's this thing of getting started to get it there. And this morning I was in a live stream with a friend of mine, Shay Cannon, and she does these CEO things every morning. And so she was talking about what is it, PLR, like private label rights type pieces. Now, as that is the antithesis of what I do and what I like, because I'm a writer. I'm like, how dare I get something from somebody else? I don't do that. But for somebody who may not be a writer, but they need to get some blog posts done or some other things that they don't know where to start, sometimes you that type of thing you can get it and then change it to make it your own, right? So sometimes it's like finding ways to just push you to get started in terms of your goal. If your goal is to write blog posts or your goal is to have a blog, but you don't know where to start, sometimes you need to look for something that can help boost you until maybe you don't need it anymore. So I hope that kind of is aligned with what we're talking about.
It is, Dr. Tachi. I think sometimes I'll talk to authors that want to be speakers or anybody that wants to be a speaker, podcaster, whatever. You have this goal of being a speaker, but you don't have any speeches. What do you do? Well, I believe in turning that camera around. If you can see me on our live stream, I'm turning my hand like I'm turning my phone towards me. Do an event. Here you go, Tom. See it? Yeah. Do an event one way or another, meaning do a TikTok, do two TikToks, do an Instagram live, do a Facebook live, have a room, host a room. Look, today, right now, there's 13 people here. When Dr. Tachi gets on the stage or Debbie, she's in a way practicing their message. She's getting comfortable talking to more people. It's really part of chunking that bigger goal of maybe presenting in front of 1,000 people or 100. Hey, come back in an hour. There might be 100 people in the room. Then you've upped your speech from 13 to 100 people. So okay, let's go. What's Charles got going on? Let's see what I'm looking at. His entrepreneur, philanthropist, visionary. I'm looking to align with those that have. I'm looking to align with those that. Okay, looking to align with intellectuals. Well, I'm not. I can pretend to be an intellectual. So
Yeah.
Charles, what do you got for us? What are your thoughts on all this?
Uh, well, you had me at measurable chunks, right? When I heard, okay, you got to give it to people that they can understand, that they can want to know more about those measurable chunks and how they fit together. So you can see that we're starting a podcast, 222 Human Rights, at WMNF Community Conscious Radio Studios, with sending a message out, measurable chunks of how we're going to address the existential threats we've got. We'll have experts from universities, from people within the field that have carried out the water project. The first chunk that we're taking care of is getting people 2 gallons of clean water at clinics, schools, orphanages around the world. and there's a billion people that need it, right? So we're going to have a large audience of people that want what we're professing and what we're providing. But more importantly, we're going to get those people, those empathetic intellectuals that have something to offer, which is a real simple, at this point, get the bacteria out of the water. That's what we're measuring. And we can do it. You can look at the website. Please, will be our first appearance at the studio will be September 12th. And I think we'll have a live stream Facebook. I'm learning. I sit here in the back porch. I'm 69, and I've got a message for the world, and it works. And it's small chunks, 2 gallons of clean water per person per day, 2,000 nutritional calories per person, and 200 cubic feet of secure shelter, and all of the technology and resources that we have to make that as a human right required for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. This is Charles 222. Stay tuned.
Charles, man, thanks for the work you do, the mission. I was watching some of the struggles. There's been some floods in the States and Mississippi and things like that. And we had our issues in Flint, and we have areas where water is a problem. And then today I was watching the news and I saw there was about a 1 minute segment on a water issue in, I think it was Jackson, Mississippi. And then there was about a 20-minute segment on a former princess. And I just thought to myself, wow, if only we could turn that around and talk more about that water issue rather than the princess. So keep on doing that work, man. I appreciate you. Chunks, Tom, what do you think on moving forward?
Yeah, so I think something popped into my head when it comes to chunking that I wanted to share, and it's something that that probably a lot of people, I mean, especially now because people don't memorize phone numbers the way we used to have to, right? Because you've just got your contacts in your pocket all the time. But there's a very specific reason why phone numbers are 7 digits in the US, right? And the reason why phone numbers are 7 digits in the US is that psychologists found that 7 pieces of information, right? 7 digits was a good number, one that most people were easy to remember or found it easy to retain in their working memory, right? And that's what you're doing when you repeat a phone number back, right? When you keep saying it until you dial it, is you're holding it in your working memory until you dial it. And then if somebody asked you an hour later what that phone number was, you might not be able to remember it, right? Because that's how working memory works. But what's even more interesting about that is the way that people tend to memorize phone numbers or phone numbers that you have memorized. And this is something I'd like everybody to actually do right now out loud on their own, if they could, is I want you to say out loud a phone number that you have memorized. And I'm not going to do it because I don't want to broadcast a phone number that I have memorized right now on the internet in like 14 places, because of course we're live streaming this as usual, like we do every week. But I want everybody to say that number out loud. And here's what I want to ask you. Here's what I want to ask you is, when you say that number out loud, do you say all the digits in a string, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Or do you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And the odds are it's the latter. You say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That's how you say the digits. And the reason why you say them that way is because 8675309. That's a little bit different because that's from a song. Chris, he just my friend Chris Fraze just commented in the chat on Facebook. It's a little bit different because that follows the melody of a song. But either way, what's happening is you're chunking that phone number, right? You're breaking that phone number down. Instead of 7 things, it's 2 chunks of 3 and 4. Right. So you're breaking it into 2 chunks because it's easier to memorize that way. Right. So just something to think about, that like chunking is something we do without even really realizing we're doing it. It's something you're already doing in your life. When you try to remember things, when you memorize things, when you learn new information, you usually do it in chunks. So like chunking sounds like a technical way to approach things, but really the truth is that it's just something you're already doing. It's just putting a name to something that we all kind of do naturally, right? Because we have an intuitive understanding of how our memory works and what helps us remember things best, and chunking is one of those. So just something that popped into my head that I wanted to share, because I thought it was an interesting and valuable little piece of information or nugget of information that would help people not be intimidated by the idea of chunking or trying to approach achieving a goal by breaking it down into smaller sections. Right? It's something we do anyway for memory. So now we're just saying take that skill set that you already have and adapt it for goal setting.
Okay, man, I'm in. So this is the room we discuss Clubhouse, podcasting, publishing, and social media. See, we got some comments down here. I'm going to see if we, my child. Hey, Charles says my childhood phone number. All I say is one. All I say is one. Those are more recent segment. Oh, Dr. Tachi, 8675409. We got some good mornings on here. Thank you. And we try to we consider this an equal opportunity place. So we try to call everybody up. If you want to come up, come up. If not, don't come up. Sometimes there's 100 people up down in the bottom, so we don't know who's there, whatever. You can always raise your hand, that kind of stuff. But we'd love to have your input on subjects. If you want to ask a question on Clubhouse, on publishing, on podcasting, on social media, have at it. Tom, I'm going to throw you for a loop here. I didn't tell Tom about this. The other day, I'm in a room, on my Monday room, we talk motivation, straight motivation, that kind of thing. But how to share your story and stuff like that too. So it crosses a little bit more motivation. So the one thing we were talking about as storytellers, and I'm going to let Dr. Tachi and Debbie warm up, and as a storyteller, that means video, radio, publishing, just to your friends. I want to hear a mistake that you made that you think other people could avoid. Something you did early on, something you did along the way, something you've seen done, and you're like, well, that's not the way to win an audience or build a brand or something like that. So an error. What do you got?
Okay, so I have something. I can't think of a specific time when I've done it, but I would bet money that I've done this because it's a very, very common mistake that people make in storytelling. And it's one that I see a lot of people make all the time. And I promise that it's something I've done before. I just can't think of a specific example of when I've done it. But I know I have because it's something almost everyone does. And that is assuming that your audience understands the context. Right. So often I hear this often when people are not practiced at storytelling, is that they don't provide the audience appropriate context to really understand the story. Right. So they assume that as the audience, they assume that what they know, what the storyteller knows. Right. And that's a very, very dangerous assumption to make as a storyteller, because if you make that assumption that the audience knows what you know, the likelihood is that even if some of them do, most of them will not understand your story. Right? So like assuming that the audience understands or has the context that you have in your mind is a mistake that is very common in storytelling. It's very common in communication. Happens all the time. Like I know people who are just not great communicators who assume context, and I have to stop them and say, whoa, I don't know who that is. You have to tell me who that is. I have no idea. You're assuming I know who that is. I don't even know who you're talking about. So like, you got to give me that context. And I'm sure a lot of us have had that happen where somebody starts telling you a story and you got to like pump the brakes on them and go, whoa. I don't know where that is. I've never heard of that before. What is that? Right? So that's what happens when you assume context. Assume that your audience understands the context. So that's mine.
Tom, that's a fabulous one. I'm thinking about, sometimes my wife will tell me stories. She's an analyst, and she'll start talking in terms about, like, I don't even know what the terms are, IPP or OPA or, like OPP. Who knows? She's talking in all these terms. Like I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? What does that mean? And then, oh, that's foreign exchange rates being calculated per quarter. Okay, now I have. Yeah, this is FX means. I don't know what FX means. Okay, like foreign exchange. I don't know. But there's always these things I don't know, so I ask for that clarifying. But what's interesting is Tom points out not knowing the context. If you look at a book versus a screenplay or a book versus a movie you watch, when you're watching a movie, everything appears. When they walk, when you see Al Pacino walk in the room, you know what the room looks like. You know what he looks like. You know what the other people in the room look like. When you write it in a book, you may not give that same kind of detail because you knew it in your head, or even storytelling. You knew this story and then you skip. So people, if they're, some people are visual, some people are audio. So even when you're telling that story, you have to think, how are they receiving that information? Quite interesting stuff. I'm glad we went down this path. Okay, we are going to meet. Let's go. The question. So we have the question here. So we'll get Dr. Tachi's answer on that. So, and then we'll go to our friend John, and then back to Debbie, Charles, and Deshawn. So, Dr. Tachi, something that you've done, something you've seen done, a pet peeve, something that derails storytellers. What do you got?
So yeah, two things. Definitely in terms of what Tom said, and giving a story without the context. I think sometimes though, some people like I try to be very good about explaining exactly what it is and not assuming that the audience knows. But sometimes I think speakers don't want to assume that the audience is stupid either and don't want to insult them by explaining things. So I think there's that delicate balance of explaining without making them feel bad and giving context. And then there's this other thing too that just I just talked about this last week on Mediascope. The fact that there are a few shows that the HBO Max has shelved for now, or that may be going to other networks. And one of them was supposed to be a Christmas special, a Steve Urkel Christmas special called "Did I Do That?" The Steve Urkel story. Now, my thing is like, who is this storytelling for? Because the population or the audience that would watch a Christmas special cartoon was not even alive when Family Matters was still on, which is where Steve Urkel is from, the silly character on Family Matters. So Family Matters ended in 1998. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a little bit of nostalgia for people who watched Family Matters, who grew up watching Steve Urkel. But clearly, from what I saw, the audience was probably going to be, I wouldn't even say Gen Z, probably lower end of Gen Z and Gen Alpha for this type of thing, and maybe families. But, and not that it couldn't work, but my thing is like, who is this storytelling for? They don't even know. Is this even a wise decision? Maybe why they put it on the shelf for now. So sometimes it's also not knowing the audience you're speaking to when you're telling the story. So that was an example that came up in my head. And this happens all the time in television and movies.
Dr. Tachi, that's good stuff. And I have made that error speaking in front of a group where I told a story that wasn't, I probably, had I known the room better, I wouldn't have told us the story that I told. And as I'm sitting there standing in front of the room, then all of a sudden I see faces change, and I'm like, uh-oh, that's a story. I won't tell that story again. That story might have played at the men's networking group at night, or this business, but it didn't play with Sears retirees, or it didn't play with wherever I told whatever story. Go on,
It,
Dr. Tachi.
very quickly, I've done that and had to correct myself quickly when, okay, so I would teach students when I was little. I used to love that show. You Can't Do That on Television. It's a Canadian show, but they also showed it on Nickelodeon. So you would only get references from that if you were a certain age. So my favorite thing to say used to be like, this must be the introduction to the opposite sketch. And sometimes students were like, what? I'm like, the opposite sketch. You don't watch it? No, they don't. Because they were probably really little when that came on. Because I was little when that came on. So it's also like we were talking about reading the room and understanding. Because sometimes to sit there and explain that reference would take too long. So use something that they're going to know and understand rather than an obscure reference that you have to take time to explain. I release the mic.
So true, so true. I these mistakes like this, I'm one who's not afraid to admit the mistakes. I remember doing an interview in Manchester United, and I started talking about like Steeler football and me going to the games or whatever, and they had no clue what I was talking about, and it was I needed to like back it up and get out of that as quick as I can. Okay, we are going. Debbie, I'm going to give you another minute. John, storytelling faux pas that you've made or you've seen made. You've had a lot of guests on your show. What bores you to tears? What shouldn't people be doing?
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm getting ready to go in the air in a few moments. So I want to jump in. Tom's absolutely right. The only thing I would say is read your audience, know who your audience is. But the most important thing, and this is something I tell my guests all the time, is don't get lost in the details. Details bore people. If you're like testifying in court, no one wants to hear that stuff. Here's a great example: the old fable, the boy who cried wolf. When you start telling that story, it can be short or long. The moral of the story is important. However, you start going into what time of day or night it was, what the weather was, all that is insignificant to the story. So don't get lost in details. Nothing will cause eyeballs to glaze over like too many details and needless information. So remember, don't talk down to your audience, read your room, but don't get lost in the details.
Well said, brother. Well said, man. Don't get lost in the details. Go on, Tom.
Yeah, I 100% agree. People do tend to get sort of like mired down in unnecessary detail, right? Extraneous details that don't move the story along. So provide context, but definitely, like John's saying, don't provide extraneous details, right? So I'm trying to think of, so for example, and this is something my mom will probably never hear or see this, uh, but I'm going to call her out anyway. She does
Clip
not
him,
give
please. Please clip Tom. Okay. Go
she
on,
does
Tom.
not give good directions. And I remember when I was learning how to drive, this is pre Google Maps, pre MapQuest. Maybe MapQuest was around, but anyway, everything was on paper, right? So there was no GPS in cars or anything like that. And my mom, when giving me directions, would always provide extraneous details, like a white house with a really pretty oak tree in the front yard that I was going to pass. And I said, okay, what do I do when I see that house? And she'd say, nothing. You just keep going. It's just a really pretty house, right? That's the first thing that popped into my head as an example of extraneous detail. It doesn't help me get to where I'm going. It's just something that you see along the way, but it doesn't actually further the story. It doesn't help you get to where you want to go. So, when you tell stories, especially if you're telling stories in a practiced way, if you're getting up in front of an audience, if you're creating content around those stories, talk through them and then look back at the story and ask yourself the question, does this further the story? Do I need to have this information be part of the story, or is it just extraneous detail? Is it fat? Can I trim it off? Right. And I think that's what John's talking about. But I used to get so frustrated with my mom as a teenager when she would tell me these things, like, you'll pass this house and then you'll see a tree that looks like this and you'll see this thing. And I'm like, what do I do? And she's saying, nothing. You just keep driving. And I was like, stop telling me about those things. I'm going to be distracted looking for them. I'm going to miss my freaking turn. I was like, what's the name of the road? She's like, I don't know, but there's a church on the corner. And I'm like, forget it. I'll ask Dad. So anyway, that's a good example, I think, of extraneous detail. So I definitely agree with John.
Great stuff. And we're here trying to move everybody forward with their storytelling, wherever you're at, whatever level. You sell 1 million books, you're writing movies, you're telling your story on radio, you want to get the confidence to turn your phone around and make your first video. There's errors that we could avoid. I always say, if somebody else already banged their head up against the wall and made these kind of mistakes, you don't have to repeat the same thing. Listen to Tom, Dr. Tachi, John, what they're saying. There's good wisdom here. Okay, my friend Debbie. By the way, my friend Debbie, you should meet Holly. Holly, you should meet Debbie. I think you guys would love to chat. But Debbie, so you have any questions for us, or would you like to share one of those things that you messed up in some way and at some point and you think, dang, I won't do that again?
Well, I think for me, either with writing or speaking, it's a communication style, right? And for me, I do things too quickly at times. So it's all about slowing down. I think my mind, I think faster than I can write or speak. So things can get lost in translation. And that's where it can be a breakdown of communication, whether it's in the storytelling or whether it's speaking in front of a group of people. So it's slow down and be cognizant, especially of your audience, whether it's through the book or a room full of people. That's my 2 cents.
Debbie, that's a good one. I love this slow down idea. As a publisher of books, I see so many stories that, or people know the story so well in their head. They can tell you this story, and they've told that a lot of times. They've told this story 20 times, 50 times, and now they decide to write it. Now they decide to make a video about it. Now they decide they're going to write a movie about it, whatever it is. And then when they actually tell the story, they miss critical details that would move the story forward. And then they skip things that, like, I would love to know what else was going on there. So I think it's because they're moving so fast and they're so used to telling that story and they know it so well. So great points all around. Okay, let's move on here. We have not met Nicole. 2 plus 2 will give you 4. Makes sense to me. If you want a different outcome, you will need a different equation. Okay, I agree. This is interesting. Nicole, you hear what we're talking about? We were talking about chunking your goals earlier, and then we're talking about mistakes or errors or nails on the chalkboard, things that are annoying, things you messed up on, something that you could share that might help somebody else, or if you just wanted to ask a question, hey guys, should I do this or not? Well, I'm sure John or Debbie or Dr. Tachi could give you a good answer. So go on, Nicole.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And Tom, thank you for pinging me in here. It's always great to hear you guys chat and talk. I love the topic and the discussion. I definitely agree with Debbie. Slowing down is a big thing. In my own experience, one of the things that I don't like to do is I don't like to give like social references. And I know Dr. Tachi touched on this earlier, like just kind of assuming that your audience is going to understand or connect with a show that you've watched or something like that. I live a very different reality. So I don't have internet in my house. I don't watch TV. I don't stream or anything. So I feel like for me, it allows me to get creative. If I want to explain something to my audience, I typically use metaphors or like, kind of painting the story, the picture together. So, those are just things that I've noticed because I've been in the audience and people are using like social references of current events or things that are happening. And I'm like, I have no idea what this person is talking about. So I typically take it back to like a metaphor or a feeling, a time in my life where I felt like whatever I'm trying to describe. And I've learned in my own experience that seems to help me better because I'm not far fetching or throwing something out there, hoping that it hits.
Those are really great examples. Those social references. If in writing, one, or in storytelling, do people know what you're talking about? And if your book is meant to stand the test of time, if I give Like I saw recently somebody referenced Moonstruck. I referenced Seinfeld, or I know I referenced Goodfellas. Well, what about all the people that have never seen that show? And granted, a lot of people have, but is it a miss? Could you use a metaphor that's very interesting and astute as far as if you want to make a timeless story, one that's going to be around 20 years from now and still mean the same thing? Well, should I use a social reference? Did you ever notice if you watch Saturday Night Live, whether you like it, don't like it, there's news segments on Saturday Night Live. And on a given week, you might think they're humorous and things like that. But if you watch back like 10 years later, 20 years later, because those news segments are so topical, the humor does not stand the test of time during the news segment. Well, it's on the first week, it's great stuff. People love it, high ratings. Later on, it does not stand the test of time. Okay, we are going to go. We'll go ladies first to Holly, then to Ibrahim. Holly, on any of the subjects we're talking about, the floor is yours, my dear friend Holly.
Thank you, Dominic. I always enjoy being in this room, and I'm going to go with the mistakes area that we've been talking about. And one of the things, and I'm guilty of it, and I know I'm sure everybody is at some point, but it's talking down to your reader, your listener, whether you're speaking or um, writing a book, whatever it is. And what I mean by that is when you, and I'm racking my brain to come up with a good example, and I can't, but when you tell somebody something and then immediately explain what you just told them, and then tell them something else and immediately explain it, it's like you don't give them credit for knowing anything. And there are times when you say something that needs to be explained, but not everything. And I I am guilty of that at times. And so I really have to catch myself and think, they understand, the majority of people understand what that means. I don't need to explain that. So I take it out or, rephrase or whatever. But I think talking down to, because people get tired of that. They, and I have quit books before because I felt like the author didn't think I was intelligent enough as a reader to understand what they were saying, and just on simple things. So talking down to, I think, is something that we should try to avoid, and then and know the time and place to do an explanation, I guess. That's it.
Holly, there was so much there that talking down. I have two quit books where all of a sudden, let's say it's a book on sales, and they're saying it's a management book and they're talking about sales, and they're like, sales will not go out and make the calls. You have to do sales will not work hard. So and I'm like, what? To assume, to make this broad assumption that so sometimes you'll see that in management books or something. So definitely agree with what you're saying. There is also this term of, and Dr. Tachi, you're probably familiar with this, don't tell, show. And this is in all stories that I'm involved in, even on the videos we make and things like that. I'll catch myself. Like if I have a co-host on one of the shows and I'll start to say something and I'll be like, yep, you're right. Don't tell, show. We don't need to say this. We don't need to say this. So Holly, great points. Dr. Tachi, what do you think on that? Don't tell, show, and don't talk down to your um, viewer, your guest, your peeps, whatever.
There are so many other places I can go to be insulted. I don't need to voluntarily go to be insulted by watching your show and having someone talk down to me. So absolutely, that's the thing is there needs to be a level of respect, definitely, for the audience in everything you do, the way you talk to them, the way you present things, the way you show up on camera, the technology you use, all of that to me communicates respect for your audience, that you appreciate, and appreciation, that you appreciate them being there. And that's the quickest way to get people to stop watching. I can't tell you how many people, live streamers, I stopped watching because they had great content, but the way they spoke to the audience, or the way they assumed that the audience didn't know in almost a condescending way. And the thing is, I would like to think that these people didn't know that that's what they were doing, One thing I'm not in the habit of doing though is going and educating you when you didn't ask my opinion. So I'm like, it's time we part. So 100% agree with that.
Excellent, Dr. Tachi. Okay, Clubhouse, podcasting, publishing, and social media. Tom, is there anything I'm forgetting today that we need to talk about as we're going to go? We're going to meet Ibrahim next, but you're if you wanted to bring us back on cue, we on path here?
Sorry, there we go. I did want to circle back to goal setting. And the reason I wanted to circle back to goal setting was because there's something else that I think is a really important part of it that I didn't talk about earlier. And that is, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about now, I think, and that is saying it out loud, right? Nothing makes your goals more real, more tangible, and holds you to account more effectively than saying it out loud. Because what you do is you create, you know, I know our mutual friend Chris talks about this all the time. It creates accountability partnerships for you, right? It creates accountability. It invites people to hold you to account for something that you are saying out loud you're going to do, right? And so I think it's always important. And when you, I think when you to kind of tie it to how you present, right, on camera, how you present to your audience, when you talk about your goals out loud, inevitably you will talk about, especially if you're setting goals well and you're choosing goals that are reaches that are difficult for you to accomplish. You're gonna talk about naturally. You're gonna talk about the challenges that you face in trying to accomplish those goals. And that will ensure that you're not talking down to your audience, that you're not condescending to your audience, and that you're not sort of putting yourself on a different level than your audience, right? So it's one of the reasons why I really like to talk about mistakes, difficulties, challenges, because not only does it convey to your audience that you are fallible and you don't see yourself as perfect, but it also makes you relatable to them, right? It gives your audience the opportunity to see themselves in you, to empathize with the challenges that you're facing and the struggles you're facing, and therefore to form a deeper connection with you, right? And from a business perspective, that kind of deeper connection is really what makes the difference, right? Between somebody pulling the trigger to work with you and going somewhere else. So yeah. So I think saying your goals out loud is a really crucial step to to doing that, and that's one of the reasons why I did my vlog for my Ironman training, and why I'm doing the same thing for marathon training. It's also pushing me to set new goals for myself because I want to keep it going, because I actually have enjoyed the process and I've enjoyed the feedback, and I've had a few people come back to me and say, I did X, Y, and Z because I kept seeing you show up and talking about what you were doing and what you were going through, and how, sometimes it was hard and sometimes it felt great and all of those things. And it made me think, well, I can do something more, right? Or I can challenge myself too. So I want to keep doing it for those reasons. It's good for me, and it appears to be good for my community too. So it's sort of a win-win all around. So yeah, I think saying it out loud is incredibly important and valuable.
You did motivate me as well, Tom. There were days where I probably wouldn't have done something, or one day I was practicing for this mile swim and the weather was bad, and I would have just ditched it, well, that's it. And my cousin called. He's like, well, how about we ride our bikes and run? And I'm like, okay. And I had seen everything Tom was doing. That's not something I'm not one that usually does two different things at the same time. So I'm like, well, this guy's doing it. I guess I'll get out and do it. So I do this taking oath. So if anybody, as we go here, if you want to tell us a goal, go ahead. But the question that we're really talking about is an error that you've made, something that's nails on a chalkboard to you, something you've seen. So we're going to hit Ibrahim, then our moderator, our main man, Brian P. Swift. So, Ibrahim, what do you got, my friend?
Hello, Dominic. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. You sound good and you look good. Look at the suit on this, guys. All you other people in this room need to step up your game because Ibrahim's got a bow tie. Did you tie that bow tie yourself, Ibrahim?
I did. I think my wife helped me out too.
I have not figured out how to tie a bow tie yet. I can do a double Windsor with a tie, but not the bow tie. Go on, Ibrahim.
All right. Thank you so much, Dominic. I just want to share about two experiences that I came across this week, and I think it might be relevant for this topic that you have today. Uh, Someone from Clubhouse DM me, and they wanted to connect with me, but they also mentioned, well, actually, I checked their social media and I saw that they do podcasting, and I went and checked their podcast. Great content, very professionally done and presented. And so I was so excited. I was like, wow, this is a good production here. I need to follow up with this person. And they invited me to their room on Clubhouse. I came into their room, and when I heard that person talk, it's like almost every sentence or every other sentence was the filler word, and I was disappointed because I was presented with two completely different personalities. One on the podcast, great content. I know podcast editing software can help edit the filler words, but then here it was very completely different person with constant filler words. And my point here that I'm making is that while software helps, I think it's also very helpful for us to identify the filler words that we use and work on improving them. I think filler words are okay if used occasionally because we're human, but the contrast in which this person presented themselves, so professional, and then in reality it's a different personality, it can create confusion or disappointment based on who your audience is. So it's just one of those things. And I too have worked on improving filler words that I've used in the past, and I'm still working on them. But it's one of those things where one has to be aware of it and work on it and not rely on the software only to help us out and we are a different person in reality. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about appreciation and audience engagement. And I so like the fact that Dr. Tash mentioned that because I was going to use an example. I came across her IG live a few days ago, and what a very good example. I am learning from her. I'm actually studying how she does these IG lives because it was one of the most engaging that I have come across on IG Lives. I do encourage you to check it out if you haven't done any of the videos. I've only checked two so far. But I think it was Maya Angelou that says people would forget what you said, but they would never forget how you made them feel. Just watch and see how she's engaging the audience, how she's welcoming, inviting, and it's like in person. It's not even like she's looking at the camera. It's like in person, engaging with the people, and I found that to be very, very effective. And she's funny too, and she was being real. She was just being who she is, and the same person that I saw on IG Live is the same person that I hear when she is in the room. So that's the type of consistency that I'm talking about. And Haz is a very good example that I encourage anyone, if you haven't checked her IG Live yet, check it out. And I'm learning from those examples. So thank you. That's what I wanted to share. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Ibrahim. I think I wanted to respond to the first thing you were talking about, that person who you had heard on a podcast, thought they were great, went into their room and were confused and a little bit disappointed with the way they presented there. And I think it's a great example of the danger of over polishing yourself for media, right? It's the danger of wearing too much makeup. It's the danger of not really presenting yourself as a whole person or who you truly are, flaws and all, and instead presenting an idealized version of yourself that you think your audience wants to see. Right. And so rather than working on improving, as you were talking about, Ibrahim, rather than working on improving your use of filler words and trying to rely on them less, in the podcast, it's clear that that person just edits out all their filler words. They remove all the ums. And I actually had a conversation with our friend Ben from the Failure Guy podcast when he was editing the episode of his podcast that I did with him, when I was a guest on that episode. He said there were a lot of ums that he was going to take out. And I said, don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. It's okay. In my opinion, it's okay for me to say It's not every word, it's not every sentence, it's not all the time. But when somebody puts me on the spot and asks me a question, you need a couple of seconds to gather your thoughts and to put together a cohesive answer. And you use filler words to fill those gaps as you're kind of forming an intelligible thought. And it's okay if you use filler. So I told him, stop spending all your time over editing and taking out any gaps or any little filler. Just leave it in. It's okay. It's who I am. I am not perfect. And I'm okay if people know that, because none of us are perfect. So I think it's a good lesson to learn, and something I'm glad Ibrahim shared was, don't over polish yourself, right? If you may, I say, right, look, I just used a filler word. It's okay. I'm okay with it. Just make sure that you present yourself authentically. Be relentlessly authentic. That's way more important than being over polished. And I know that's why Ibrahim responded to Dr. Tachi's live stream on Instagram the way he did, is because Dr. Tachi is Dr. Tachi all day, all the time, 24/7. She is who she is, and she holds that up unapologetically and presents herself authentically. And that's why her live streams are so engaging, I believe. Dr. Tachi, if you wanted to add something there to what Ibrahim was talking about with your
Dr. Tachi, I want to know
go
this
ahead.
too. I want to know, Dr. Tachi, are you upping the caffeine intake before the live stream? Because you are on fire. I mean, the energy that like Ibrahim's feeling, I'm feeling it too. So let's hear it, Dr. Tachi.
First of all, Ibrahim, thank you so much for your kind words. I so appreciate you watching and coming in. Thank you so very much. I'm bowing to you humbly. You can't see. No, this is just me. That's why I don't need anything, because I am overly caffeinated on life. So I don't need anything to alter my state. And I do agree. Let me go to the filler words thing as well. I think my podcast partner, when we first started, he had so many ums in there, and he knew. And I said, well, you kind of have a lot of ums in there. I don't think it's too much of a problem, but we could work on reducing those. And he wanted me, since I was editing, to take it out. Well, that gets old really quickly. So I said to him, um, I said it just like that. I was like, you're going to need to work on reducing if you don't want to have them in there, because I'm not taking them out anymore. And that worked. It was, we all say, there are a lot of filler words, and I think they're okay. I think they're fine. But for him, it was a little bit excessive. And so the goal for us was to work on reducing it. So for me, the threat of I'm not editing these things anymore and it's going to go up as is was enough for him to be thoughtful about about words before he said them. So sometimes that's what it is. Often, we're searching around for something to say, or we need a minute to think about it, like Tom said. That's when the filler words come in. So I think it's okay. I think it can be excessive, and you can start to lean on them as a crutch. So you have to be intentional with your words as well. And once you start doing that, it just becomes habit. It's easier than people think to get some words out of your vocabulary or lexicon or start using other words. You just have to actively practice that. So that's what I would say. And thank you both for the wonderful words again.
I just want to I
So
want to throw in one little thing there, which is something that I do, and probably all of you have heard me do in this room before. If you are struggling to find the right word to describe something, it's also okay to say out loud you are struggling to find the right word to describe something. It is something that all of us do as humans. We all struggle at certain times to find the right words to describe something. It's an incredibly relatable experience, and it's something that it's okay to share out loud. So if you're struggling to find the right word, if it's not coming to you, just say that out loud rather than just going, just share what's going on in your mind. People likely will be able to relate to it. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
that's very interesting, Tom. Somebody asked you a great question. Let me think about that. Hold on. I want to give you an appropriate answer here, not just throw something else, because this is an important question the way you asked it to me. I heard somebody say the other day, I've never been asked that question before. And then they went into their thought process rather than the ums. And so, hey, John Jay, when you have people, go on, Tom.
I was just going to say my most hated response when I hear people being interviewed and they get asked a question and they don't quite have a canned answer for it or a prepared answer. This is especially happens in politics. I hear it all the time. But my most hated response is, "That's a great question." Hate that. Hate that. If especially if that's your response to every question. And if you listen to interviews, you'll hear people use that one all the time, and they'll use it for like 5, 6 questions in a row. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Right. And that gives them a little bit of time to start formulating a response. But I hate that one. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Like, oh, what a terrible response. If you don't know, just say you don't, you don't have, I haven't thought about it that way before, or I've never been asked that question before. That's an interesting perspective. I'd love to, let's explore that, or, whatever the case may be. But yeah, just that's a great question. Ugh, drives me nuts.
Good stuff. I'm loving it. You guys are great. Clubhouse, podcasting, publishing, and social media. We're here every Wednesday. You can follow the room. We have a room. You guys said to us a couple months ago, why don't you have a club? Why don't you have? So we have a club. You can follow the club. We listened. We try to listen. We don't do everything right. We're learning. John Jay, on this subject that you get somebody on your show, they're too polished, or on the other side, they got too many ums and things like that. What can they do to bring it back? Or did they just blow it? What do you got for us?
Well, first of all, I have to edit it for radio first. So when I do my editing, I pay the most attention to my voice, because that's the one that sponsors are going to align with and send money to. The guest, it's okay if they have some flubs. When there's obvious mistakes, one of the things I tell them, since we're recorded, we don't do live, is if you make a mistake, say edit loud, take about a second, and then pause and start your sentence over. It's very easy. So if they have uhs and filler words, that's okay. I leave it in there as part of their storytelling. It's when it gets excessive. And when it gets really excessive, I use Adobe Audition. I can highlight the uhs, which is usually at the start of a sentence. I can copy and paste it and do a copy and do a noise reduction and eliminate those throughout. So there's some trips. The main thing is what I do when I will copy a little bit of I don't want to say dead air, a little bit of silence from the interview, because there's always ambient room noise, and then I will paste over those. But I don't get rid of all of them. It's when it is excessive, only when it's excessive. My pet peeves, Tom's right. That's a great question. I'm so sick and tired of people saying that. The other one is starting off sentences with so or like. People say like 37 times in 2 minutes. That's a problem. So what I try to do is I put most of my attention on my delivery, and I eliminate spaces so they're consistent, because I have to go to radio first. If it was live, it'd be a different beast.
John Jay, Tom shaking his head on the live stream. He agrees with you. Those were great points all around. Holly, do you want to add something there? Nope, but Holly can say what she wants when she wants. Go on, Holly.
I'm sorry. I was talking, but I didn't hit unmute. I really don't have anything to add, Dominic. I'm just listening and taking it all in, but thank you for asking.
Okay, we appreciate you. Now we are going to meet Brian, Hunter, and Elle, and then we got our friend Olswana and Julie. So Brian Swift, we were talking about some mistakes. We're talking about goals. And Brian, I know you. I've dined with you. We hang out, so you can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. That's the kind of carte blanche you have, Brian. Go on.
Wow, I am honored. Thank you. Love everybody in the room. Everybody's comments are so awesome. So thank you for that and your honesty. Two comments I have are one about goals. I agree with you, Tom, and everything everybody said about goals. I'll take it even further, and I try to create vision boards on top of saying your goals out loud to yourself. On top of writing them down, I love vision boards, and actually, I have several of them because I like to see them throughout the day. So I keep one in my garage, which I spend a lot of time in exercising or doing woodworking. And I keep one in a room where I'll call it the study. So even you want to take your goals further, create a vision board for yourself. Picture says 1,000 words. So I find them awesome. In terms of podcasts or whether it's live streaming or podcasts. I started a podcast about a year ago, and I started without having numerous guests. It's called the Positive Perspective Podcast, and I got equipment, relatively cheap. You don't have to, break the bank on doing that. In terms of editing, I decided I'm not editing. I mean, it's uh, nobody's perfect. This is not a production. And if a dog barks, a dog barks. And if, the neighbor makes this gigantic sound and you happen to hear it, you happen to hear it. Or if I mispronounce a word, I mispronounce a word. I think sometimes you come off more real. And to Abraham's point, and Tom, you commented on it, you don't want to put on too much makeup and be phony. You really want to be genuine. You are who you are, and people either appreciate you for that and the content you provide, not because I don't think they're listening to your podcast because it's been cleaned up of all the ums or likes. But I agree. You try to do the best you can. So I've never really edited a podcast. My feeling is you got to run with it. You got to be genuine. You got to be you. I'm complete.
Mr. Swift, thank you. We love you breaking it down. Be yourself, be genuine. Listen to the guy. He writes books. He raises money for his nonprofit, raises almost, I think, over $250,000 to help make the outdoors more accessible to people in wheelchairs. Writes books, has a podcast, has a show on AM radio. So he is doing it. So definitely authentic as can be. You're getting Brian. What would you say there? You are seeing Brian will show you behind the scenes and show you who he is.
Well, I mean, I don't talk about some of that stuff, and I just didn't but I am genuine and I am real. I don't put on. I am who I am. I've always been that way. I don't talk about a lot of some of the other stuff because I don't want people to have this perception, whether it be good or bad. But yes, it's I am a quadriplegic. I've been blessed to accomplish so many things. I have a radio show. I have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. Working on my 7th book, and totally blessed to be able to do all the things I do from a wheelchair, especially being a quad with limited mobility. So you could find me on Facebook, you find me on uh, LinkedIn, and I will jump around on rooms. Dominic and I do a room every Monday at 1:00. And we have been blessed to have a lot of people here today on it. Come listen to us at 1:00. Our topics will totally range. It's all about inspiration, but we are very organic and we'll let the conversation flow. So if there's any questions you have about any of the things I'm proficient in as a speaker, as an author, and as a coach, back channel me or look me up in on one of the other social media. So thank you, Dom, for those kind words, and I will relinquish the mic. Thank you.
Hey, fantastic, Brian. And let's see, as our producer, Jimmy, you might not have ever heard me say this, but I say it because of you. So, producer Jimmy one time says, look left, look right. She called it Brady Bunch style. You see all these faces, all these little profile thumbnail pictures here. Make sure you connect with each person on here, left, right. It is, I just did it too. We are all in this room on this day for a reason. Find out what that reason is, connect with somebody, look them up, see what they're doing. Who knows? Maybe you find that reason, a bigger purpose. Hunter, what's going on, my man? I'm reading the bio. I'm moving fast. I'm reading his bio. I followed the guy on Instagram. So, Hunter, you hear the subject, go where you want to go. Come on, man.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay, Dominic?
You sound good. You sound smooth voice. I wish I had a smooth voice. Go on.
That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. I haven't been on Clubhouse much for ages, so I'm a bit nervous to be honest, but I really appreciate how much everyone's been talking about authenticity and just being real. I really appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I'm a filmmaker myself, and I also make music, and I do a lot of creative things like that. So when I saw the topic was social media and that sort of thing, it reminded me of something I've been struggling quite a lot with recently, which is I feel like so much of what I post is just promoting my own stuff. And sometimes I get a bit sick of it, and I feel like I don't want to bother everyone. Like, I don't want to bore them because I'm always popping on, like, hi everyone, here's another film that I've made. And I feel like I don't want to harass everyone just telling them about my projects all the time. But because that's the work that I do, it's kind of, if I don't promote it, it just won't happen. So it's kind of difficult. So I was really helped by what you were saying, Tom, about how sharing the stuff you're dealing with can actually help other people, and that talking about yourself and your own life can actually inspire people in a certain way. And so I realized that might be a helpful shift to me to think more about how me sharing my experience can help others. And so it's not actually harassing them or annoying them or bothering them. It might actually be inspiring or helpful. But if it's okay, I'd love to just open that up as a question to everyone of like, have you ever struggled with promoting yourself on social media, and do you have any ideas of how to get around that? Because if I don't tell people about my films, no one will see them, and if I don't tell them about my music, no one will hear it. But I just get so sick of doing it. So I wondered if anyone has any ideas. Thank you, Dominic. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
I love this subject, and it's something so many marketers, so many people, you're passionate about your business, you're passionate about your products. So, how do you not beat people over the head with it? My first answer to you, and I definitely want to hear what the rest of the room says on this, is to document what's going on. If you documented your screenwriting process, if you documented the back porch where you're writing this next movie, if you documented the Starbucks, or I don't know, does he drink Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts on the way into the studio every day? But you're still telling me where you're going. You're still getting me engaged in the product. I'm in your vortex. So I'm a believer in inviting people into the vortex. And then once they're in there, you don't need to beat them overhead. Okay, every so often you can tell them, here's the date of this, and then document you picking out your suit. I wonder what he wears to the premieres of whatever. Now I know he has a premiere and I know what he wears. So anybody else that wants to jump in on that, how do you
I
not?
do.
Okay, go on, Swifty.
No, Hunter, I think something that might help is maybe talk about the subject matter and leave the term, me or you out of it. And I think if you address the subject matter and let people know the subject matter of your films and the things you're doing, it might feel less self-serving because the subject matter is something that might be entertaining to people, might be helpful to people. So maybe talk about the subject matter to try to initiate getting that type of getting your work out there. And I think you might even draw more people to it by talking about the subject matter, because everybody's going to be attracted to it for different reasons. Some might not be attracted to it. Some might say it sounds interesting. Some might say it sounds helpful. Some might say, I'm curious about it. So I might go about it that way if you're not. Second thing is, and this is totally self-serving, I admit it. Dominick and myself wrote a screenplay. We are looking to see how to get a movie made out of it. So maybe you could back channel Dominick and myself, something we've worked on for years. And I'd love to pick your brain on it. So, Dominick, I'm being self-serving, but Dominick has spent a long time, as well as myself, working on a screenplay. So that's my comments. I appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Hunter. Okay, let's meet. We are going to, Dr. Double exclamation points from Dr. Tachi. Dr. Tachi, do you want to add something, or are you just celebrating with exclamation points?
Well, I'm celebrating, but I did want to add because I too have felt that way. I have a lot of projects going on, and sometimes it could feel like you're inundating your audience with information about what you're doing. But as Brian said, as a lot of other people said, you can add value. Maybe that sounds empty, but adding value. So, as Brian was saying about the subject matter, give some information about the subject matter of the film. So if you're doing a film about birds, giving some facts, giving some information about that, something that ties to it, I think is a good way of doing it. Also, maybe doing some. I'm a big fan of live video, obviously, and live streams. If you did like maybe a live, it doesn't have to be on Instagram, it could be anywhere, where you have a guest on to talk about that. Somebody may be an expert in whatever it is you're talking about to add some context to it. That could help. So just offering valuable information in addition to what you're already doing, then it doesn't feel like you're inundating your audience. And then also you can use, there's all sorts of 80-20 rules, but 80-20, 80% of what you post should be giving value to the audience. 20% should be selling, quote, yourself to the audience or whatever product or you may have. So you can think about it that way as well.
I just want to say thank you all so much. That's incredibly helpful. I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to have to go write down those ideas. And Brian and Dominick, I'd love to be in touch. That sounds amazing. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Hey, thank you. Like we talked, that producer Jimmy said, that Brady Bunch style. You never know why you're in a room, connect with people. Maybe it's to help Charles on his mission of getting clean water to everybody. Maybe it's to set new goals. Maybe it's to step out of your comfort zone. You never know. L. That's how I say it, L. What do you got going on? What are your thoughts on all this?
Hey, how is everybody? I'm loving this room today. This is fire.
We always accept compliments, so you just bought yourself 30 more seconds with no hook. Yeah, kidding, but go on.
Gosh, again to Hunter, I'm writing notes too because you all provide so much and give so much. You're giving so much for free. I just would love to see more people in this room because people pay for this, right? This sort of level of advice and sharing. But I did want to add something that I actually was given to me and I've employed now for a couple years, and that is a coach said to me, "You have to touch your dreams every morning. Your dreams every morning, not your goals. Your goals are going to come after you've identified the dreams. So every morning, it is about literally touching my vision board, my planner, where I have written in the back where I've done like a master dream. What are my dreams? Like the big stuff, right? And then my goals are going to be towards that. But it has made such a big difference because my day, the mundane things of my day now are connected to a dream. And I'm not mired in, a pesky client or it's just all part of the bigger dream, the bigger goal. But I can tell when I don't do that in the morning. My day could be derailed by, a phone call, an email is a little off-putting, whatever. Um, but as far as social media too, if I'm connected to my dreams, my social media content is gotta call it. That's all I wanted to add was just really being in touch with your dreams and then everything flowing from that.
Elle, you were killing it, man. Really, I receive what you are saying, and I love this idea of, for me, I work on being on mission. If I'm on mission with the goal, let's live in a world where positivity is cool. And if I could try to share inspiration, positivity, smile, try to help other people do the same, well, then I'm on mission throughout that day. And it keeps me knowing that no matter if somebody's yelling at me because of a comment on a page or because of, damn it, something I said here or there, well, I can accept that because I know I'm on mission and moving forward. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, we are going to go ladies before gentlemen. That puts Julie ahead of Girish and Sawana. So Julie, where do you want to weigh in on all this?
Well, that's a really great question. Thank you, Tom. I'm just kidding. I was kind of joking around there. I find that hilarious. I always think, oh, wow, I'm a really great interviewer. They think it's a good question. But what a pet peeve, right? There's so many different things. I get what Hunter was saying. I sometimes, looking back at everything that I do on social media, I'm like, I feel like a narcissist just posting all these things about me, me, me. But, take a look at the analytics behind Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What are the people enjoying? And typically I find it's like just stupid shots of me, like, I don't know, doing something just ordinary. And you can filter it in with moments of inspiration. Tom are so great about it, but people want to see a vulnerability, like a slice of vulnerability on social media, at least from my perspective. People want to see that you're just like them. I mean, yeah, you may have put a filter on your picture or something like that, but you want to connect with them. And how best can you do it? If you're a filmmaker, like how best are you connecting with that audience? So I love this room, and everybody make sure you share because Dom and Tom put their blood, sweat, and tears in this room and shake it up with a little positivity, motivation, education. So thank you.
Shake it up. Hey, we appreciate you, Julie. And like Dr. Tachi would say, I sign on all those points that you made. I want to let you guys know I was running in New York a couple of weeks ago, and I ran through the streets and ran up into Central Park. And like I'm taking all these cool pictures while I'm running. I think I'm the stuff. I shared a lot of the cool pictures. But what I didn't share until yesterday, I talked about it for the first time, and I'll tell you more. I'm running through the Bethesda Terrace, and there's all these weddings, all these beautiful people. I slipped on some of the granite or whatever and slid like a baseball player sliding into second base almost through some people's wedding pictures. And sometimes that's the stuff you don't see when you see all these positive things and all this stuff like that. But it's okay to turn those cameras around and let people know here's the behind the scenes, or like Tom said, here's without makeup, here's what my when my car's dirty, here's me going yesterday and getting a COVID test for the next production I'm working on. They went up both nostrils. Man, the lady took her time going up both nostrils for this COVID test. Those are the kind of things letting people behind. It's not all glamorous and beautiful. Girish, what do you got for us?
I'm just here to listen, but thank you again, Dominic, for bringing me up. And it's great to see all of you after such a long time. And great notes, great goals, and just write them down as much as you can. But just don't forget to just enjoy in the process, because sometimes we tend to forget not enjoying what we do sometimes. So please be mindful of that. That's all I got.
Girish, you nailed it, said it clearly, concisely, and is a great reminder to appreciate that journey. Tom, damn it, I quit. Now we are on to Olsawami. What's up, my friend? How are you doing, Tom? That's gonna be the last person on stage today. Then we're gonna wrap. So, Olsawami, ask a question. Correct me if I mispronounced the name. I apologize. Much respect, though, and thank you for being here, my friend. Thank you, everybody. But Olsawami, go on, my friend.
Oh, great! Good afternoon. It's afternoon here in Nigeria. I really like to say that I've been blown away by the content here, the value given on this platform. These are absolutely amazing people. Dr. Tachi, oh my God, the energy is amazing. Tom, thank you very much. Hunter, Charles 222, great stuff. Thank you so much for giving these amazing value. However, I just want to say something about, say two things. And these are the two things I have personally experienced. First of all, about storytelling, and secondly, about goal setting. Something I did early this year, being a public speaker and also a public speaking coach and a communications consultant, I had to write down most of the things I had to accomplish. And honestly, I did something. I I wrote down something that is just too big, something I know I cannot accomplish in a year, something that would take me probably 5 years to accomplish. But I did that because I know that to write down what you imagine is free. No one charges you to write down what you imagine or what you can think about. It's just free. So I just wrote it down. But I discovered that there was something mystical about it. I discovered that the moment I did write it down, I noticed that I could begin to take actions. It just happened that I could take the first step, take the second step, and something that I thought would take a year to accomplish is taking me like 6 months. And I said to myself, "Oh my God, if if it's taken me 6 months to accomplish something I could have accomplished in a year or 2 years, perhaps I should keep writing everything I want to accomplish down." So I just think that people should go out there and take the risk of sitting down with yourself and then writing the stuff that you want to accomplish, whatever it is. Just think about it and write it. The second thing I want to talk about is the concept of storytelling. Today in Nigeria, today I do a lot of workplace happiness coaching. When I was in some of the I will say the downest point of my life, because I went through a lot of stuff. I'm trying to find my feet. There was a particular time in my life I got thrown away from the place I lived, and my stuff was littered everywhere because I didn't have the funds to pay for my rents. And it was at that point that the concept of teaching people how to live happier lives, especially people who are not really getting work satisfaction, teaching them became a big idea. Now, even in the midst of my pain, I began to teach and then started to tell stories. Stories about and how I came out of it. And here is what I want to say. I gave details of what I was going through. I also knew when not to give details of what I'm going through. So, in the aspect of storytelling, I would say we have to draw the line. What stories do I have to tell my people or my audience that would entail that I give absolute details so that the people can really understand me? And what part of the story shouldn't I give details? Because if I can make this separation, I'd find myself in a place where I wouldn't get my audience worked out or my audience bored about my speech or my talk. I'd get them in a place where they'd say, okay, this guy is actually getting across to us. We understand what he's saying. We understand the concept and the context. I think it was Tom that talked about that's a context. He understands the situation. He understands where we are in and what we can take in and what we cannot take in. And I think we're going to listen to him. And finally, I want to say that we should always try as much as possible while telling our stories to be ourselves. We cannot overemphasize this. Someone told me some time ago, he said, why is it that when you come online and you do your live videos on Facebook, you really don't care about the absolute packaging? Why? And I said to him, I said, if it's life, then it has to be real. If it's life, it has to be something that everyone can relate with. And because I know that people really want to connect, why don't you just do it? Just do it. Instead of trying to make everywhere look so cool, so nice. And to end this submission, I do a lot of work with rural people in Nigeria. And most times when you're dealing with them, then you don't have time to package. You don't have the time to package. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that you are you and they are going to relate with you based on how they see the world, but you are going to also try to relate with them based on how what the new concepts you want to bring across to them. But then you must come down to their level to make sure that your message gets across to them. Thank you very much, guys, for giving me the opportunity to speak in your platform and follow all the speakers immediately. And I'll be here next time. Thank you very much, guys.
Hey, Osawami, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the points. And I know Tom talks a lot about writing down and the scientific why writing things down is so important. So I will tell you, I am officially done. I have said too many times today. So on that note, I bid each of you adieu, and I'm thankful that you hung out for an hour or so. But we will let Tom do his thing and close this shop up. There you go.
Thanks, Tom. As always, I want to thank everybody for being here this week. I was actually impressed. I think this is probably one of the sort of heaviest vacation weeks out of the summer, right? It's the last week of summer vacation for a lot of folks before kids go back to school right after Labor Day. So I'm sure a lot of people are traveling, a lot of people are on vacation, and really appreciate everybody who's here making the time to be here. To join us and to share with us. Really appreciate you guys. You guys are why we do this, building this community around this space that we hold every week, around this room that we are in every week together, is the whole reason why we do this. This is not about me and Dominick. This is about all of us collectively. So really appreciate you guys being here. You're the reason why we do this. And then the other thing I want to say is yes, to writing down your goals, but also yes to saying them out loud publicly, right? To other people. I think that's incredibly important. I kind of hit on that a little bit earlier, but I want to leave it with that. Saying your goals out loud publicly will do two things for you. It'll create accountability, right? And it'll also provide the opportunity in sharing those goals with other people for you to hold yourself more accountable than you would otherwise, because you know that other people know what your goals are and what you're working towards, right? So that's the reason why I started sharing my Ironman journey, my training vlog back in March when I started my training. It's why Dominick has talked about his mile-long swim that he just completed and his training for that. And it's why I'm going to say my two new goals out loud right now. And they are one, which I've already done the first video for. I'll do another video today, but it's my marathon training vlog. Yesterday was day one of marathon training. On December 3rd, I'm running the Rehoboth Beach marathon down in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And my goal there is to run that marathon. It's the first standalone marathon that I've run. I've run the distance before, but always as part of an Ironman race. So it's my first standalone marathon that I've ever done. And my goal there is to run that marathon in less than 3.5 hours. So that's my goal for that. And then my other goal, which is sort of tangential or related to the marathon goal, is a video I put up a couple of days ago where I was talking about having the Britney Spears song, Oops, I Did It Again, rolling around in my head all day. The reason for that is because I accidentally, in air quotes, signed up for another triathlon this fall. So on October 2nd, I'm going to be participating in the Mighty Man half iron distance triathlon out in Montauk on Long Island here in New York. That is a 70.3 race. So it's a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike, and then a 13.1 mile run. And it's a race that I've done before. It's actually the first half Ironman long course triathlon that I ever did back in 2019. And so I want to do it again. Last time I finished in the 5 hours 46 range, I think, something like that. And this time my goal is to finish under 5.5 hours. So we'll see if I can shave off that 15 minutes somewhere in that race and see if I've gotten that much faster over the last few years. So that's the other goal. So I'm saying it out loud. Hold me accountable. And I will share that journey with everybody, on social media. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in the rooms in the weeks to come. But thank you, everybody, for being here. Say your goals out loud and then work hard to find them, to accomplish them, to achieve them. And I expect next week when you all come back that you'll be sharing your goals with us as well. So we look forward to seeing you guys then. We will see you next month on September 7th, right here on Clubhouse, podcasting, publishing, and social media. And with that, I'll leave it to you, Dom, to close the room. We'll shut it down.
Peace out. We'll see you guys. Love you.
Bye-bye, everybody.